Welcome to the Ports and Shipping News from Visakhapatnam.
India's Ministry of External Affairs, Dr.S.jaiShankar, India-Russia ties in changing world in the Primakov Institute of World Economy and International Relations on 8th July 2021 during his visit to Russia.
Esteemed Dr. Jaishankar, I appreciate very much your presentation. It's very thoughtful. It's an excellent analysis of the most important issues of the current international agenda, and I guess it would be helpful to the scholars of our institute. I guess we have some time for several questions, if you don't mind. So let me start. What is the Indian view on the rise of China and its international impact? Do you see this view is diverging from the Russian viewpoint, and how significant is those diversion?
Well, I can answer the first. I think you might be able to answer the second better. But the first one, in terms of how we see the rise of China, if you look at it not as a political science analysis, but as in the flow of history. After the Second World War, as the grip of, I would say, Western imperialist powers in the world weakened, large parts of the world became independent. They assumed control over their own destiny. They took time to actually rebuild their societies and, I would say, get over the damage which years of colonialism or foreign occupation had caused them. So, if you're not talking just about China, but I will come back to China here, what you have seen pretty much continuously since the last 75 years is a rebalancing in the world where new production centers have come up, new consumption centers have come up, therefore new prosperity has come up, therefore new power has come up. And I would say China represents perhaps the largest, the most dramatic of these cases. But there are other cases. If you look at ASEAN, which in many ways on the economic side, certainly socially led the way to some degree, or what you call the East Asian tiger economies before that. So in a way, China is part of a trend. In a way, China is an exception because of its scale, because of its history, because of its power today. How do we perceive it? We perceive it for us, it's a natural happening to some degree because we see ourselves in a similar situation. Maybe our timing may be some years behind. Maybe the pace and intensity of it may be a little different. But you could say broadly in this same time span, actually India's position vis-a-vis the rest of the world has also changed. Now, why is that particularly impactful for us? One, because of course we are an immediate land neighbor of China. Two, we have a lot of outstanding issues, primarily the border, but not just the border issue. And of course, three, because it changes the dynamics of Asia very much. I would say it changes the dynamics of Eurasia. So there it matters as much to Russia as it does to us. How do we see it together, comparatively, India and Russia? I think to some degree you can find the answers in forums like BRICS, where we both see virtues, profit, advantage in collaborating between ourselves, between China, as well as, we have something called RIC, but we also have a larger grouping which involves Brazil and South Africa today. How do we assess it strategically? there I can only speak for myself. I would say for the last 40 years, we've had a very stable relationship with China. It is, I'm not saying that there were no issues and challenges in the relationship, but it has been very stable. And it saw a big economic element. China essentially emerged as our second largest trade partner. But for the last 1 year, there has been a lot of concern about the relationship because, China has not observed agreements that it had signed up to when it came to our border. After 45 years, we actually had a border incident with casualties. And peace and tranquility on the border for any country is the foundation of a relationship with a neighbor. So naturally, if the foundationship has got disturbed, so has the relationship.
Okay, thank you very much. If you let me say a couple words about the difference of perception. And I derive this difference mainly from your answer. We have a huge land border with China. It's more than 4,000 kilometers. We do not have a border with India. So the difference of perceptions from both capitals, from New Delhi and Moscow, derives from this difference and this geographical specificity. So please, colleagues, who would like... Alexei Arbatov, academician Arbatov, please.
Your Excellency, thank you for your sophisticated presentation. My question is there a nuclear arms race between India and China? Is there a prospect for nuclear arms control between India and China?
No, I don't believe that there's a nuclear arms race between India and China. If you look at the points of time when India and China became nuclear weapon powers, China became in 1964, India became in 1998. The Chinese decision, and I say this as someone, this was my academic specialty when I was doing my PhD. The Chinese decision to exercise, to make nuclear weapons was primarily focused on the United States and the then Soviet Union. I would say both the history, the scale, and the nature of the Chinese program, therefore, is much more linked to the US and Russia. In our case, we exercised our nuclear option, saying upfront that we would be aiming only for a minimum deterrent. Actually, there were very few countries who actually said that. The only other country which hinted at that when they made nuclear weapons was France. But even France was not so explicit as we were. So for a country which, where there's a 30-year gap and the later country says, I'm aiming only for a minimum deterrent, I don't think you have the basis then for an arms race. I think the evolution of the Chinese program has a much larger dynamic than ours.
Thank you very much. Ambassador Trupnikov, please.
Your Excellency, first of all, thanks a lot for a wonderful presentation. I would like to ask a question, which today is rather actual. 2 decades back, or around this time, both India and Russia were closely collaborating, fighting the menace of terrorism from the soil of Afghanistan. We both supported the so-called Northern Alliance, both morally and even materially. Now, after the United States and allied forces leave Afghanistan, the prospects of instability, it is recognized publicly, the prospects of instability will rise. What, in your opinion, might be spheres of close cooperation between India and Russia today in putting, so to say, an obstacle to spreading of instability from the soil of Afghanistan in the region as a whole, specifically to the nearby countries? I mean, Central Asia, from our point of view, which is near to Russia. Of course, China. Of course, India. Kashmir. First of all. And
said good words about our relationship over many, many years. Our relationship developed because there were people like you who worked for me, so hard on it. So I feel it's only appropriate to recognize that. When I was actually in Moscow on my first posting in 1979. So when I look at this at this issue, I look with some sense of history, not just of 20 years, perhaps even of 40 years. What has changed for us? If one looks at the issue of terrorism, because that was the first concept you brought up, both India and Russia, we are against fundamentalist thinking, radicalization. We are against violent extremism. We are against terrorism. We are pluralistic societies. We have been targeted, both of us. And I don't think for either of us that has changed. I don't think we have changed our position on terrorism, on fundamentalism, on violence, and on defending pluralistic societies. What has been our position on Afghanistan? We have both supported, we were very clear 20 years ago, certainly, that we were for a united Afghanistan, we were for a sovereign Afghanistan, we were for an Afghanistan where minorities had a fair share of representation. We were for an Afghanistan which was at peace with itself and at peace with its neighbors. I don't think that has changed. So if the first principle, the terrorism principle, hasn't changed, and if our Afghanistan approach hasn't changed, then let us look at what could have changed. I would say, it's important when we look today, and since you again referred to the erstwhile Northern Alliance, it was not just us, it was also Iran was involved in it. And yesterday on my way to Moscow, I actually stopped in Tehran, and I had a chance to call on the president-elect, Ayatollah Raisi, and to meet my counterpart Javed Zarif, and clearly we discussed Afghanistan in some detail. So I do think that the countries of the region, both the, I would say, near region and the little bit beyond region, have a very strong interest in ensuring that we get an outcome in Afghanistan which is both good for Afghanistan and which is good for the region. And they are not different, because I can tell you what is good for Afghanistan will automatically be good for the region. Now, whether we have the wisdom to do it, whether we have the clarity of thinking to do it, I think that is very much up to our generation. So, at least from my end, I can say we are quite clear what the challenges are. But in diplomacy and in international relations, you never take anything for granted. So you have to keep working at it, keep building partnerships, keep making people understand what are the challenges and what could be the consequences of that.
Thank you. Alexei Kuprianov, please.
Your Excellency, thank you very much for your brilliant presentation. I'd like to ask you, you mentioned the Indo-Pacific. What does India want from Russia in Indo-Pacific? Which role could Russia play in the region from your point of view? I mean, in the Indian Ocean region, in the Pacific Ocean region, and in the Indo-Pacific as a whole. Thank you.
Look, Russia is I use the word Euro-Pacific because I think it captures it better than just saying Russia is a Pacific power. But it is a Pacific power. At the end of the day, what is Indo-Pacific about? Indo-Pacific means that it is no longer practical to draw some line somewhere and say, well, this side of the line is different and that side of the line is different. Okay, and that's essentially the case I made in my talk. Because when I look at India, 25 years ago we started something called Look East. It matured into Act East. Today Indo-Pacific is a further advancement of Act East. What has changed in this period? Today our top trade partners include China, Japan, Korea, Russia, of course, Australia, ASEAN. Our trade with ASEAN is almost $100 billion. So if I were to take my big hubs of trade, the trade I have with ASEAN would roughly be the size of the trade I have with Europe. The trade I have with China would be about the same. If I put China, Japan, Korea, it would be more. And it is not, in one way it is something new, in one way it is something old. I mean, if you travel up from India, through Southeast Asia, you look at the coast of Vietnam, you even look at the coast of China. I mean, Indian traders, Arab traders came there for hundreds of years. I mean, there are still, archaeological sites even in Fujian province, near Da Nang, Hue in Vietnam, which are Indian, not Indian now, but Indian 1500 years ago. So the point I make on Indo-Pacific is, for reasons of a certain period of history, powers, primarily European powers, okay, and European powers not including Russia, okay, they drew lines, they made changes, they created walls, they broke up connectivity, they re-architectured the world as they wanted it. I think today this part of the world says, well, thank you very much, now you're over. Now my natural process will start to flow and things will happen. And I think Indo-Pacific is very much an outcome of that. Now your question, where can Russia come in? I think in many ways Russia is there. If Russia acts like Russia, Russia will make its full contribution. I mean, when I speak today of a Chennai-Vladivostok maritime route, when we speak of Indian economic investments in the Far East, when Russia takes part in the East Asia Summit, all of that to my mind is very much part of Indo-Pacific. So I think beyond a point we should not get caught up in these very, I would say, semantic debates, terminological debates. Terminology is important, I'm not disputing that. We need to move with the times of the day. This is a globalized world. We can't divide the world into little bits and pieces and say, well, some countries will do some things and other countries won't do other things. I think that's not the way the world works anymore.
Thank you so much. Please, just представьтесь, пожалуйста.
Please introduce yourself.
Honorable and most esteemed Minister, I am Dr. Anwar Azimov. For a long time I was a distinguished ambassador, now I am extinguished this year, but still I am very committed friend of India, served 15 years in New Delhi, including I was DCM in our embassy. I am a great patriot of our bilateral relations, and I really appreciate your presentation, which was well thought, overwhelming, profound, and inspiring. I especially liked your remark that our relations and our friendship, shouldn't be taken for granted. We have to work hard in different directions. There are certain powers who tries to divide us. I don't think that they will be successful, since our relations are based on a number of very firm principles: mutual sympathy, mutual trust, confidence, and equality. Equality, we really work like equal partners. But we have in our bilateral relations a number of institutions, a number of mechanisms of bilateral cooperation in military, trade, economic, academic. But I think, Honorable Minister, one element is missing. That's why my suggestion, and I want to hear your reaction on the reliability or the possibility of realization of this idea. I think that, of course, we have dialogue, summits, ministers, etc. I am interested in the forum of think tankers of both countries, of the former politicians and, first of all, former diplomats, shrewd, skilled diplomats. In India, there are a number of excellent Indian ambassadors to Russia. In these connections, I think it is a credit for India, it's credit for you, for the ministry, that you have such a distinguished and very capable ambassador who really has high reputation, including in my ministry, in other ministries. So, idea is to think about setting up an Indian-Russian, Russian-Indian center for strategic analysis and research, based in New Delhi, perhaps in Moscow in this institute. This center will be the focus of the attention of very prominent diplomats, politicians, academicians, with one idea: to think about the prospects of our relations, how we have to enrich these relations, to give new impetus, new content. In my opinion, if we realize this idea, our relations will be in the firm hands. Thank you.
Oh, I completely share your sentiment. I will give serious thought to it, and please don't take that as a polite, response, because I do find that today we need to create new platforms for engagement. Some years ago, for example, we worked with one of our think tanks and created the Raisina dialogue, and I'm very happy to see every year the Russian participation in Raisina has been very strong, very good. So the idea that if we can have some kind of bilateral mechanism, some kind of bilateral think tank, some involving retired diplomats, I think it's an idea worth considering. I will certainly go back and reflect on it.
Thank you, Your Excellency. You know, we have rather good relations with Rasina Dialogue, and we invited Samir Saran frequently to our institute, to our Primakov's reading. I may tell you that during recent couple of decades, we are heavily invested in Asian studies. Mm-hmm. In China studies, in Japanese studies, Korean studies, ASEAN studies, and of course of India. Maybe you know, IMMO is number one among Russian think tanks according to Pennsylvania ratings. So we are working hard as much as we can. So I very much appreciate your time with us, and I guess that your thoughts would serve like a meat for rather able scholars who are gathering in this audience. I guess that one of the most important, let's say, messages which we got out of the current developments is health does matter. So I wish you health, good health, prosperity to your country, and thank you for coming.
Thank you. It was a real pleasure. I'll just step down for a minute and I'll see one or two people.
Thank you for watching. Have a nice day.